Well, good morning, good afternoon. Hello, everybody. I'm Adam Chirinis. I'm your host for today. I want to welcome you all to today's webinar called How to Drive Business Results Using Customer Intent and Behavior Insights. And it promises to be a really interesting and very in-depth look into the use of digital data to really improve your marketing. The focus on search, but it goes much broader than that. I think you're going to learn a lot today. So actually, whilst we're waiting to get started, I'm really curious to know where everybody's located. So why don't you put in the chat where you're located? Just put your city and state in there. Hoboken, New Jersey. All right. Boston, Columbia Falls, Montana, Chicago, Fort Lauderdale, Pittsburgh, Oxford, Connecticut. Hello, Brian. Telford. Cool. Well, that's great. Göttingen, Germany. Well, I think that's the furthest east that anyone's ever attended one of our webinars. So that's very exciting. Well, great. Well, welcome everybody. So let's get started. I'll introduce everybody in a minute. Then I might introduce Scott in a minute. So the learning goals today are how to define customer intent and behavior insights. We're going to go into where to find these insights, how to put them into an actionable framework so you can do stuff with it. And then from a business standpoint, aligning audience intent with your customer journeys. And then lastly, we're going to get into a very actionable plan in terms of what you can do to bring these to market to, to meet your business goals. A little bit of housekeeping. A session is being recorded. Somebody asked about that earlier, and I will share the recording with everybody who registered after the event. It'll be a couple of days from now. If you've got any questions, put them in the chat. Scott and I will take a look at them and either answer them during the presentation or there should be time at the end. But your questions are really important, so put them in as they occur to you. So just a little bit of an intro about me. My name again is Adam Chirinis. I'm the founder and CEO of Healthlaunchpad. We're a new kind of sales and marketing firm for health technology. I'm a health tech sales and marketing guy. I was the founder, CEO of a health tech company, started in 2012, and we sold the company last year. Prior to that, I was in marketing for 20-something years, and I started Healthlaunchpad basically to do three things: to help the community of health tech sales and marketing people connect with each other. I'll tell a little bit more about that in a minute. Help you learn, so events like today, but also we have other forums for people to learn from each other, and then grow. So I have a consulting business where basically I help you kind of figure out where you can make improvements in your marketing, how you can get better customer insights, and then develop new ways to grow your pipeline. I mentioned connecting. So we have a part of Healthlaunchpad called Connect, and it's a community. It's a free community for senior healthcare sales and marketing people. Actually, this is 195 people and growing. It's actually out of date. It's now up to it's close to 250. And we hold events, events a bit like this. Actually, they're workshops. They're a bit smaller, a bit more intimate. And all kinds of other different activities to improve, to help you guys network with each other, but also their learning opportunities. So if you're interested in it, you can go to this URL. I'll put that in the in the chat in a second. If you're interested, take a look and join. So now on to today's presenter. So I'm delighted to present my great friend, Scott Ellis. Fellow Brit, we both are we expats? I don't know. We're both now live in the US. I've been living here since, despite the accent, I've actually been living here for over 30 years. And Scott and I met on a plane, actually both going back to the UK, I think about 15 years ago. And we both had the same story. We've both been in marketing, both met these wonderful American women who became our wives, and fortunate enough to come and live here and developed our own marketing businesses. And so Scott is the president of agency operations of a really smart firm called Adworthy, and he'll tell you a little bit more about them in a minute. He's got a very broad marketing experience from events, hospitality, all the way through to now digital marketing, and he's based in New Jersey. So with that, I'm going to hand the baton over to you, Scott, and I'll let you go ahead and present.
Cool. Thanks, Adam. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Do you want to do the screen share?
Yeah, bear me 1 second. I'm just going to get this up. See if I can navigate this. Okay, it's going to be a two-step process, guys. So if you can just bear with me 1 second, we should be good. Put it on presenter mode. Let's get it over here. Okay, are we working okay?
Looks great.
Great. Well, good afternoon, everybody, for, I guess, East Coast and out into Europe. And thanks for joining us. We'll try to not put you to sleep too early. And then to all of you further west, good morning. So today I'm going to dive straight into this, and thanks, Adam, for that intro. As we jump through here, we'll kind of give you a little bit of background. So again, just a very quick background on Adworthy in terms of why should we listen to this guy. So Adworthy's been around for 20 years. I've been at Adworthy about 9 years now. We work across all verticals. So we have experience across a wide range of industries, everything from healthcare, pharmaceutical, B2B software, publishing, you name it, we've worked in those areas. And that's really because we're a specialist firm. We're not one of the big agency names that you'll be familiar with, but we're really sort of, one of our characteristics is we love problem solving. So we've done that both here in the US, we've done that internationally. And really just there, as you can see, I'm not going to go through each one. You can kind of see the areas here that we focus on and how that relates to today's webinar. Just one shout out there in terms of sort of our credentials, I guess, in this area. We have been recognized by Gartner over the last 3 years across their digital marketing, digital advertising, hype cycle reports, and also more recently, which was kind of fun, in their cool vendors in AI for marketing. So just a little bit of background, and we'll go past that. How that relates, we have built our own software platforms. So we have one called Wordivore that handles the SEO and content optimization space, and then Adworthy, which focus around all things paid advertising. For those of you jumping on today, again, I assume we may have a variety of people, both from sales, marketing, and maybe operations. One thing I'll say today about the things that we're going to work through and talk through, there is data here both for the sales and the marketing teams. Now, we are big proponents in this whole sort of behavior insight space of that connection between sales and marketing. It's absolutely critical. Too often, possibly because of the size of organizations or just sometimes the personalities involved, sales and marketing may not work as closely together as we would certainly recommend. So to give you an idea of the problems that we solve, and this will come out in the webinar today as we run through how these insights are used, sorts of things we solve are maximizing brand visibility for your target audiences, determining the right content for your target audiences. One of the things we see today is there is absolutely no shortage of content being produced. And I'm sure some of you on the call today are probably sick of being asked to produce one more article. So we're going to talk today about how we make sure the right content is being produced and not turning into just this continuous treadmill. We'll look into website relaunches and organic visibility, how to generate dramatically better ROI from your paid advertising. You may believe that we've gone past the days of sort of pay and spray, and that with the amount of measurement that is available today, we would have refined some of that marketing approach, but still we frequently come across advertising that is and advertising dollars that are being spent too broadly and not generating enough return. And then the final one, and again, this is the call out to the sales teams here, improving lead quality and generally overall quantity as well. Lead quality is something that we often see organizations struggling with. We work both with organizations on the lead gen side as well as the e-commerce side. But lead quality is often something that kind of goes through this yo-yo effect. And so we'll talk a little bit about how the insights that we're going to talk through today can help you with that. And this is designed, as said, to be very sort of practical and things that you can take back to your business or your organization today. So in terms of what we're going to cover in today's session, and I think sort of Adam already included these in his little preamble, so I'm not going to talk through each one of them, but really, again, starting to define the areas that we're talking about. How do we glean those insights? How do we put them into an actionable framework? Again, one thing that Adworthy and I in particular get frustrated with are all these conceptual frameworks. You know, somebody goes and talks about a strategy, and then someone says, well, how do we execute that? And that's at the point that everyone starts tending to look around the room slightly confused and not too many volunteers. So we're very much an execution firm, and we'll talk about that in more detail today. So as we all enter today and then kind of today's landscape, the world that marketers and salespeople are living in, just a few key things here, I think, that set up why these behavior insights and customer intent insights are so important. Obviously, marketing budgets are under increased pressure. Throughout the lockdown, whilst not all companies are losing, some are winning, some are losing, there is absolutely increased pressure on marketing budgets. So that's something as we're spending those ad dollars, are we spending them as effectively and as efficiently as we can do? Are we measuring it, and are we generating a return? We're operating under increasing privacy concerns in a privacy landscape where we have everything from GDPR, CCPA, HIPAA, and now cookieless targeting is coming down the pike. So all things that marketers are having to contend with, and going into this very much of a different approach, whereas before we knew who we were targeting, now we're going to be a lot more reliant on these intent and behavior signals that we've known they've been there in the past, but we may not have been using that data as broadly as perhaps we should have done. I think the next piece is, we all know in-person events have been canceled. So things that organizations, especially sales organizations and marketing, have relied on, in-person events have predominantly been canceled. We are now living in this online everything world. And speaking personally, I think, again, if the online everything has sort of drawn of differing levels of fatigue with how much information can be consumed and how much time you spend in front of a screen. So reaching that target audience it has never been more challenging. And one of the things that I would call out here in this last piece is that being consistently visible at the right time in the right place has never been more important. And I'm sure a number of you are kind of maybe nodding your heads and going, well, Scott, yeah, that's obvious. They're the marketing principles. They are, but some of the things that actually play against you in this environment are things like the advertising platforms that we're using. So again, we're putting more and more trust in these platforms, and oftentimes we can't rely on them. We can't rely on them to make sure that we're consistently visible, because ultimately their goal is to generate as much revenue as possible and to show your ads in concert with your competitors' ads. So one of the things that it's always important to sort of be aware of is how consistently we are reaching those audiences and what are the size of those audiences. So what does this all mean? Why do you care? Good question. Really why we should care is because sort of understanding customer intent and behavior has never been more important. If you want to increase sales, if you want to generate increased ROI, and you want to consistently generate sales qualified leads. And to the point that I made a minute ago, when you can't know the who, when you can't use that first party data, or whether the data or the third party data that you may have had access to in the past is no longer available, you can know the what it is they want. And if you know what they want, that then equals customer intent. So as we look at customer intent and we start to define this customer intent and behavior insights, what do we really mean? Well, what we're talking about here is pieces of data that provide you with information as to what it is your customers and prospects really want and need. Again, in theory, marketing basics, listening to your customers, but where is that information stored? I mean, there's surveys that you can do focus groups, but what we're going to talk about here is a wealth of data that can be accessed that is going to give you real insight into who it is, or ultimately who it is, but what it is that they want. And this is an important piece, a little bit about who they are. So is it the patient themselves? Is it a loved one? Is it a customer, existing customer, a prospect, a decision maker, or is it the assistant to the regional manager? And why is that important? We've been involved in a host of different scenarios, and I'll give you two sort of quick examples here. One was in regards to a superbug drug, and trying to understand and sort of reach the people who are going to be making the decisions about the treatment. And what we found was that through the sort of analyzing this data, analyzing the intent data, and some of the device data, we were able to understand that the person doing the searching actually wasn't the patient themselves. By the time they heard about the superbug, they were already very sick. So it was their relatives and loved ones who were there at the hospital, trying to, hearing these terms for the first time from the doctor, and then literally going away, getting on a mobile device. This is where we saw a spike in the initial acquisition of information and trying to understand a term. They went straight to their mobile devices to look up what this term was. And so as they then started to educate themselves, that had a direct impact on trying to influence the treatment that essentially their loved one was going to receive. So that's kind of one scenario, again, where a linear approach to, we want to reach the patient may not be the best approach. You need to consider that broader sort of caregiving circle. The other scenario, and it's kind of the bad joke about the assistant to the regional manager, is oftentimes, and Adam, I think you've got a good plug for this. I've got a good plug for you, which was Adam's blog post on the 7 personas of sales champions. One of the key aspects of this is to really sort of start to understand that the person who's making the decision, who's looking to put an RFP together, and that's the RFP that you want to be on, they may not be the decision maker. Oftentimes they may go to somebody who they work with and say, hey, I'm looking for this. Please give me 4 or 5. This is the criteria. I need companies that do these 4 or 5 things. So whilst we as marketers and we as salespeople are looking for a very sort of nuanced discussion about why me, not somebody else, the person doing that initial search may just be looking for 4 or 5 key things that they have to go back with. So as you consider that, and as you consider what it is that people are looking for, it's just really important to understand that there are different people in that decision-making chain. And whilst there are things that may to you seem very basic as information, that's because you're educated, or put another way, you may be too close to it. So understanding that consideration cycle and who is doing the searching, who is looking for the information, becomes a critical piece of this. And then we get onto, okay, we started to talk a little about what they are, but where can they be found? And we'll talk, this is something that is a theme throughout this webinar, which is what are the data sources that you can access in order to find this information. So as we go through this, and typically, as I sort of say there, a lot of this can be in these online marketing platforms, but also this isn't just about online. Again, typically we may get a little sort of caught up in the online world, but a lot of you may be dealing with call centers. So you have transcripts, you may have live chat on your website. Anywhere that the words are being used becomes potentially a really fruitful place for you to be looking to better understand what it is that people want when maybe no one else is looking. So, jumped one there. So what are the characteristics of this data? And again, back to some marketing basics, but we'll put a slightly different spin on this. It's the when, the where, and the what. And when we start to talk about the when, this is where we start to look at things like day of week, hour of day. And it's really an essential component of understanding your audiences and their behavior. And what's happened recently is we're all very, very aware now. This is something that it may have changed fairly dramatically for your organization during lockdown and now that people are working from home. So as you start to look at things like your paid advertising targeting, as you look at your website traffic, what are the trends that you see? And if we're looking at something that is in, say, for example, a B2B organization, so business to business, you may be selling a software platform. Historically, that's existed very much within those working hours, Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. as a sort of broad brush. If you're in a business to consumer environment, again, that may be flattened out, and you may start to see sort of research happening during the week, and that research ultimately being fulfilled as a purchase at the end of the week. So as you start to look for this data and you look at the trends that are in your web analytics, how does day of the week behavior, what does that trend look like? And then if you break it down even further, and again, this is where your advertising platforms may come in helpful for that data, what happens during the day? And as I was putting this webinar together and we were putting this slide up, I suddenly started to look more intently at this slide, and specifically the 7 a.m. alarm call, the nice steaming cup of coffee, and what seems like a very relaxed workday. I'm sure we all miss those days. It's a great life that somebody is living. But it becomes very important to look at these things. So what would have happened potentially in a scenario is that someone would have woken up, they may look at their emails, they get ready for their morning commute. So again, if they're in the car, then maybe a podcast or radio advertising or out of home would have been a good way to reach them. Or someone's on public transport, in which case their mobile device is likely their best friend. So during those periods, you might see increases in mobile device traffic. It probably doesn't fulfill at that point because they may be researching what it is they have to do during their day, or it could just be other media consumption. And then as they get into their workday, you start to see a lot of that device behavior change as they transition to desktops and laptops. So when you start to look at both the targeting that you have in place, but also when the messaging that you're putting out, understanding the when, so hour of day, day of week, becomes very important. And I think as we look at this in a B2B environment, one of the things that, from personal experience I can call out is the days during lockdown now look very different. As Adam mentioned, I have 3 small children. We have them, a couple of them are basically being schooled from home. And my schedule as a result now looks very different. So whereas before your targeting may have started at 8 a.m. in the morning, I know that there's a bunch of people who are probably getting up at 5 a.m. trying to get some work done, get the kids ready, get them set, and then get back into their work. So in that scenario, you may be seeing more traffic in the earlier hours of the day when previously you weren't running paid advertising campaigns. And there may be an opportunity there to say, actually, let's start to look at this and see if we need to extend during the day. And maybe we want to go dark for a few hours. Now, one thing I'm not saying is, and this is kind of the audience of one, the lockdown and people's behavior is dramatic, impacts everybody differently. So I'm just an example as someone married with kids. Somebody who is single, maybe confined to their apartment, again, that's a different audience. They may have the same intent, but their behavior could be different. So just something to really think about here as we start to look at the when aspect of this, is looking at when people are coming to your website, look at when your call centers are busy, but then also look at the outcome of that. Not just how much traffic is coming through, but look at, are those people converting? Are the phones ringing? What are the outcomes? Because that will ultimately then help determine whether this is qualified traffic or whether it's just more sort of noise. Next, we get into the where. And again, marketing 101, but it's not just about the where in terms of, is it country level? Is it city level? Is it state level? Something we frequently see here is that advertising, especially online, can blanket the whole country or multiple countries as the case may be. Hyperlocal, again, that tends to differ a little bit. But when you have your advertising budget spent across the whole of the United States, for example, how does that map to your existing customers or your existing patients? One of the things that we often see is companies kind of forgetting to look at their customer data. And for those of you in organizations that still use direct mail, and again, direct mail is a great channel to use in certain circumstances, have you looked at where you're sending that direct mail? Because when we started in the past to map online targeting with where customers are and where some of your offline marketing channels are going, typically you may see significant gaps in that data. Or that you may see that a lot of your, if you haven't got, for example, when you're running your, say you're running your paid search campaigns, let's just happen to say that you start running those in the early hours of the morning from a US standpoint, and your targeting is outside of the US, you could find that a significant amount of your budget is being used before you reach your core audience, who may be in Central Time Zone, who may be on the West Coast. So again, understanding and mapping your ad spend to where your existing customers are is very, very important. And if you have sales teams as well, previously it would have been feet on the street, maybe a little less so now, but understanding who it is that they're targeting. So getting into that account-based marketing type discussion becomes important. And then we get on to the what. And this is probably the most important aspect of all of it, which is to really understand what is it that your customers want. And what we always recommend here is looking to start with the low-hanging fruit. What are the actions they take on your website landing pages? And again, without a specific focus, it's very easy to say, oh yeah, we know that. From our experience, and this is analyzing literally hundreds, if not thousands of websites and looking at more instances of Google Analytics tracking and other web analytics tracking than we care to remember, one of the things that we typically see is that often the tracking and measurement that is in place doesn't align with the business goals, and it may not be tracking the most important actions on a page. So if you really want to understand what it is that people are looking for, and for the purposes of this discussion, putting the homepage to one side. The homepage is often where traffic is driven by people who know your brand. If we're looking for prospective customers, or we're looking for people who, for whatever reason, they may be an existing customer or client, but they didn't have your brand top of mind when they searched, we really want to understand which of the pages that they're going to, and then what actions are they taking. And to drill down a little bit further, this isn't just about looking at all traffic or all of your website landing pages across all of your channels. It's starting to drill into organic. So if you look at what are the top organic search landing pages, those are the ones that will give you the greatest understanding of customer intent. So look at those organic landing pages, look at the terms that they're using. And again, all of this data is available from Google Search Console. Again, Google Search Console, which was the old webmaster tools for those people that remember that, used to be seen as kind of the domain of the tech or the IT department. This is an incredibly valuable data source. It's the old organic search terms that used to be in Google Analytics that went away. Now you can see some of them if you have your Google Search Console and your Google Analytics integrated. But this is where you're going to see the actual words that people are typing into their browsers, into Google, when they're looking for what it is that you have to offer. So as they do this, and as you start to understand the actions that they're taking on the site, one of the really sort of key things here is to better understand what it is that they're looking for and if they're taking any actions. And just a little call out here, because this is personal bugbear and one that we come across a lot. It's just kind of important to know that a high bounce rate is not necessarily a bad thing. What it may mean is that they've come to the site, they've got what they wanted, and now they're going away to further that decision or to help take the next step in it. So all we say is one word of caution is it's really important to understand the intent that someone had when they visited that page to determine whether in this case bounce rate is a bad thing, a high bounce rate is a bad thing. And again, whether you're measuring the interactions on that page, because if someone lands on that page and they download the white paper that you're looking for, or they watch the video that you wanted them to see, it's important to have that set up so that that page then doesn't trigger as a bounce. So as we get into the what and we get into the, okay, people using their own words, you know where they've landed, but do we know what they really wanted? And here is just a screen grab from one of our applications. What you're seeing on the screen here is the Google Search Console data pulled in here. So that this is where you start to see the words that people are typically most using in order to reach this particular business. And as you can see, they're in the medical malpractice and liability insurance space. But what it really starts to do is it starts to give you an understanding of the words that people will gravitate toward. And especially, I think, when we talk about healthcare and we talk about things clinical or medical, there is understandably a real focus on precision terms. And there are there's compliance people that have to be run through, you have to speak with, and they may say, no, these are the terms that we have to clinically use to be accurate. That's absolutely true. But it is important to sort of remember or to understand, just as you can see on the screen here, that here we have an audience that's using malpractice insurance, and then we have another audience that's using liability insurance. So as we start to look at our plans, now that we know that there's different word usage, people are using different words, they may ultimately end up transacting or providing a lead in exactly the same fashion. They're using different terms to get there. So how do you start to bridge the terms that you may use as an organization? How do you start to bridge those to ones that your patients or your clients or your customers are actually using? And this becomes sort of a key aspect of your marketing. And with the data that you'll see coming in from Search Console in this specific instance, what Google gives you is data that it believes that your site is intrinsically relevant for. One of the things that we see is a lot of use of outside platforms that use scrape data, or they're using crawlers to try and better understand what their competitors are doing. And competitive intelligence is obviously important. It's something that you want to be aware of and looking at. But what we don't recommend here is saying we want to be like them. Aspirationally, sure. But it's always important to understand the intrinsic relevance of your website, what it is that you're visible for today, what words you have on the site, as obvious as that may sound, and how well do they connect with the terms that your audience are actually using. And as we go from understanding, okay, the words that are being used, the next question that we really want to address here is, what is the potential size of this audience and the specific audience segments? And so again, this is the same case in point, same organization. Now we started to break it down into the different professions that they serve. So by starting to segment this audience and understand, again, this is coming from the same data. This is your Google Search Console data. We've now started to look for people that is specifically, as they would in the case of insurance, are putting in their profession. Now we start to see the makeup of the online audience. And then using the same data set, what we're able to do is understand, okay, how many people were actually looking in a given period of time? So here you've got the last 30 days broken up by these segments. And yes, I know we're all looking at it going, what's in that other professions? Again, that would be a secondary part of the analysis, but not to get away from the fact that you can see in here, you have the nurse practitioner, a home health audience, a pharmacist audience, and each of those carries a different value. You know, there are different costs to the insurance that will be provided to each of these professionals. So this becomes an important piece now, is starting to say, okay, now we know the words that people are using. There's to an extent self-selecting the profession that they're in, and we know how many of those people are searching at any given time. Let's start to use that and say, okay, does this start to match up to the content that we have on the website? Do we have pathways or journeys set up for each of these audiences, or do we have one sort of big funnel? And again, just to remember as we look at this, it's easy to gravitate towards the bigger audiences, but especially in B2B, we're big proponents of smaller audiences. So the big audiences typically mean higher costs, you know, and getting awareness over a greater breadth of people, which is not a bad thing. But within that broader targeting, you'll find smaller audiences who use very specific terms that are very much the audience that you want to target. And it doesn't matter if there's only 100 of them a month, they could be your best qualified prospects. And by taking this approach, as we start to get into the customer journey, it's really, that is where your sales lead quality starts to have a real effect. The more relevant, the more specific you are, the better quality of lead that you're going to find is coming in for your sales teams to follow up on. And so as we go from the understanding of the words, the intent, it starts then being more of sort of a reflection and saying, how does our website match up with the intent that is being expressed by these different audiences? Do we actually have these words on the site? And it's a silly example, but there are many times where we work with organizations who say, we do X, and they'll very clearly spell out what it is that they are and the audiences they serve and the problems that they solve. When we then turn the Wordivore platform and the crawlers that we have onto that site, we'll frequently find that they don't actually have those words on the site. Or they only have them in the page content, they don't have them in the URLs. And there's a whole weighting discussion about, again, the most important words should be in the URLs, then the titles, then the content. So it becomes something that you may intuitively know, but it's not something that you may be specifically stating on your website. So again, just something for us to kind of think about here. And as we start to talk about personas, a little bit of a public service announcement here around personas, and more specifically, what we refer to as scalable personas. Personas are clearly very useful from a sort of an ideation process. Who are we targeting? What sort of media buying might we want to do around these personas? One of the challenges in the online world is that people rarely self-identify. They don't put in a search and then say, Scott Ellis, Adworthy, or Scott Ellis, advertising agency. People don't intuitively search that way. So when you bring somebody to your website, it's really important, A, to be responsive to what their needs are, and also to understand that they're unlikely to self-select, and they're unlikely to follow are you a CMO? Are you a chief revenue officer? Are you a CTO? Because they're taking ownership of the problem that they're looking to solve. So scalable personas really maps very neatly to customer journeys, which is if you're responsive to what it is that they want, and as they reach the site, you start to provide them with pathways of information that you think is relevant to them. What you'll ultimately find is that they will self-identify at some point, but that in doing and building those customer journeys, you're actually creating scalable personas. They're not going to break, and they create learning moments and opportunities where you can start to see, hey, down this pathway, someone may have clicked on 2 links and then left the site. Why did they leave? So taking it sort of back to basics for a second, just really at a very simple and a basic level, understanding, do the words that people are using to find my site, assuming you have visibility for it, do I actually have that content on my website? Or, and this is again something that we see pretty frequently, are we too busy telling them about our solutions and the treatment? And they're busy telling us about, hey, this is a problem I've got, or I've got these symptoms. And again, something that it's very, very easy to, when we work inside of organizations, is we become somewhat insular to who it is that we may be trying to serve. We forget that in telling them how great our solution is, or telling them how great our treatments are, we forget to address their problems first. And I can guarantee you this information exists in that Google Search Console data. It exists in live chat. It exists in the call center transcripts. And one of the ways that we find is a useful sort of exercise to help level set is to imagine, I would have said, 6 months ago, imagine you're in a conference room and then walk out onto the street and have that conversation. Now we're saying walk out of your apartment on your house and have that conversation with your next door neighbor. Does it make any sense to them? Because when we sit in a meeting room or when we get on a Zoom call or a Teams call, the context for that discussion is so set that we're already 15 layers deep in terms of context and nuance of the discussion. So I'm not suggesting we actually do this, but just think about if you were to go out into the street and have that very same conversation with somebody, would it make any sense to them? Or would they be picking up their phone and calling somebody? So again, just something to bear in mind to create that context. So as we start to look at this, okay, so again, lots of information here, we've got data, we get that. How do we start to put this into an actionable framework? So the way that we've done this for 15, 20 years now is to look at how people acquire knowledge. And it's very easy to start categorizing the words and the intent that they have into these sort of 4 or 5 buckets. And as we look at this, it's just really important to state, this is not a linear progression. People will come in at all different sort of angles here. Let me use a highlighter, use the laser pointer here. So not everybody is going to come in at that basic search and research level. A lot of people may already have been educated. They may have started the process sooner, and they're coming in straight at that solutions level. But as we start to look at knowledge acquisition, these are sort of categorizations of the sorts of information that people are looking for. So everything from basic search and research, then into that sort of problems. Hey, I've got a problem, or I've got a specific technical specification that I need to meet, or that I've been asked to find. And then we get into those sort of treatment and solutions terms. And again, these are the areas here that organizations very frequently live in. And that's where a lot of the focus goes into, understandably, because you're getting down to the bottom of that funnel. You're getting closer to transaction, and there's more competition there. But as we do that, it's important to start to understand, okay, how do the terms that we have and the people are using fit into this framework? How does our website content, and this is always a fascinating exercise, how does our website content, if we were to bucket it into these areas, how does it fit? And then as we start to look at, where does it fit within this overall framework? What are our goals here? Is it awareness? Is it engagement? Is it conversion? And then, again, one of the key factors, how much is it going to cost? Because whilst we'd all love to be out there with huge budgets, creating huge amounts of awareness, we have decisions to make. And your current website, your current communications may actually be better suited at certain points to specific areas within this knowledge acquisition framework. But this kind of becomes a framework for organizing the data, taking a look at your communications. So it can be website content, it could be your content marketing. And again, typically content marketing we'll see reach up a little bit further in the funnel. So it may be, again, a focus around awareness, and maybe a little less around engagement. But again, put this framework against your current activities and start to sort of better understand, do we have gaps in our knowledge acquisition funnel that can help ultimately generate more leads for us? And really importantly, help you to become a trusted brand. Because being at the top of the funnel and looking at the engagement side of things, one of the things that is often very well received by people is free information that helps to educate them. So making sure that you don't have an ask. You may give that download away for free. You may not ask for their email address. It's unconscionable for marketers, I know, and I have a hard time saying it. But again, just something to think about, which is, how do you extend goodwill, especially if you're trying to enter new markets? So just something to be aware of. And again, looking at your different data sources here. This is not just about search data. This is about your live chat data. It's about your call center transcripts. It's about your sales team's conversations. And so as we do that, and you look at the search terms, fit them into these buckets, and then start to look at the intent. And as we do that, that then gets us to kind of the starting point for customer journey. So you look at your content alignment and your brand messaging, and starting to look at the size and potential of each of those audiences. So the data may spread light on the size of an audience that you didn't know existed. You may thought it was bigger or smaller, but it's very helpful in terms of better understanding what it is that the prospective opportunity is. Because again, I think we've all been in situations where somebody said, oh, well, what about X? And we've all run around doing what ultimately ended up being very busy work for pretty small returns. And so understanding the size of that audience is key. How well does your website meet those needs that you've just analyzed? And again, how well does the marketing communications, whether it's advertising, whether it's PR and comms, how good a job are we doing of reaching these audiences? Sorry, just getting rid of the laser pointer. So when we look at that sort of for the customer journey, we've addressed the when, we've addressed the where, we've addressed the what. Now, how do we start to support it? I'm really breaking this up into two sort of key areas. One is strategic. So are you meeting their needs? And that's both spoken and unspoken. And we'll get onto the unspoken bit in a second. The goals alignment. Again, are your goals aligned with your audience goals? Sometimes they may want something and you may be trying to sell them something else. How do you start to align those things? Because if you force them, again, they'll vote with their mouse and they'll probably disappear. Measurement, again, are we tracking the most important things? And there's opportunities that come out of this. There may be things that actually come out of what people are looking for or their feedback that provides product development opportunities, customer experience opportunities, things like that. And on the tactical front that we've just already talked about, the website customer experience. Again, are you meeting their needs? Content development, do we have the right content? Our ad targeting, are we advertising in the right places at the right time with the right information? And is our messaging aligned with what it is that our customers want? And this is kind of a big thing. We've just got a small case study before we get close to the wrapping up and questions here. Something we see a lot, and I mentioned this in the video that we did to promote the webinar, is that the digital front door, your homepage, it's rarely the first step in the journey of a prospective new customer or patient. We've seen literally millions of dollars wasted on homepage design, and wasted may be a little bit harsh, but let's just say too much money spent on homepage design, because there's this idea often coming down from the C-suite that everybody lands on your homepage. That's not the case. The people that land on your homepage, they know you in some shape or form. You've already started to cross the trust bridge. The people that you're trying to attract, those prospective new customers, they're coming in at deeper pages in your site. And we've just got a quick example of this. And there's a bunch of disclaimers as we run through this. First of all, I never knew this company before I put the search in. So this is not pre-canned. This is not picking on anybody, because you could probably all do the same exercise or may have experienced the same thing and find out that there's literally thousands of companies doing this. So I put in a very basic search, healthcare risk management software. I got 3 ads at the top. I got one of the big sort of review sites, G2, providing me with the best risk management software. And I had 2 who had responsive ads, whether they were directly responsive or whether they just had these baked in, that actually responded to my healthcare search. And then I had one in the here that didn't respond to healthcare. So like many consumers or prospective clients, I picked the top one. So when I got here, and I hope nobody on the call works for Resolver, and if you do, we can talk about this afterwards. I landed on a page and there's nothing here about healthcare. It's just generic risk management software. So straight away, we have a disconnect. You haven't honored my intent. I wanted something about healthcare, and straight away, you're trying to get me into your sales funnel. Request a demo, take a guided tour. Why? I don't know if you can do what it is that I'm looking for right now. And then I kind of, okay, well, maybe there's some help for me here. So I go up to their navigation. Products, resources, customers, request a demo. Well, no, because I need to know that maybe you can do it for me. So straight away, not only has it not been a good experience, that this company has wasted ad dollars because they've responded to my healthcare specific search, but they've given me something that is a generic risk management software response. Then, okay, I gave them a chance. Okay, maybe I can find information about healthcare risk management software, but there was nothing in their navigation. They didn't talk to me about industries or verticals. So if I saw industries up here, maybe I'm like, okay, great, I can jump in there, but they didn't. So at that point, they've eroded my trust in their brand already. They've kind of bait and switched me, and it's not what I wanted. I'm most likely, as were most people, to back out and go into the search results and go somewhere else. Now, just to close the loop on this, the reality is they actually did have a lot of great information, and they had it under customers, but it wasn't organized. It was just a lot of great sort of blog content about the people that they serve. So from financial services to technology to pharmaceutical. But this is something that we commonly see. The relevant information, which was their content marketing, was put across in their blog. It wasn't aligned with the knowledge content that I was looking for in the core part of their site. So this isn't necessarily an either or, but it's something where if they'd taken this information, put it into the core customer journey on the website, called out industries or verticals, and organized this information and then linked out to this great content, then I would have engaged with them. But because they didn't make that connection, because they didn't honor my initial intent, they eroded my trust in the brand. So like I said, they have really good information, but from a customer journey standpoint, it wasn't visible to me, and they lost me as a potential lead. So as we sort of wrap this up, measurement and reporting is key. And again, just going back to what we said earlier, it's not specifically, frequently we see this not being aligned with business goals. So are the things that you're tracking, are they aligned with the business KPIs that you've been set? Make sure it aligns across all of your tracking. So everything from web reporting, paid advertising, how does that directly correlate to the business goals and to sales and revenue targets that the organization has? And when you're reporting, make sure it's focused on qualified lead and revenue metrics. Again, I think as marketers, too often we're surprised when there's a disconnect when we talk about impressions and clicks. It's really important to put all of this reporting into a framework that the C-suite, the CRO, the CEO, whomever it may be, that she or he can understand. Because they have very little time, and if they don't understand it, they're going to switch off from the work that you're doing and the results that you generate. Quick recap, and again, this will be in the recording. So the when, the where, the what. Here's the intelligence that we're able to gather. Here's the impact area. So it could be ad targeting. It could be when your emails go out. It could be everything from your content marketing, being responsive to their needs. The data sources that you can use, again, there are more than this, and email marketing would be another one. But Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Amazon, Apple search ads, they all have the information that gives you insight into customer intent. And then finally, this is just, again, hopefully a good takeaway slide. When you start to look at this information and try to say, okay, well, how do I actually operationalize it within the organization? We call this, it's a framework that we use, it's called GMAD. But very simply, it's identify the business goal, then determine the media that you're going to use. Again, if you're looking for awareness, then programmatic or social become very helpful. If you're looking for engagement and conversion, then better understanding your paid search efforts and your content marketing, those things become more important. Having the measurement criteria in place, analyzing what worked and what didn't. And again, specific emphasis here on the what didn't. Often we learn more about what didn't work than specifically what did work. And then decide, did we meet our goal? Can we do more better from what we've learned in this process? And then you can basically rinse and repeat. Anyway, thank you everybody for your time today. Very much appreciated. I know you're all busy. Hopefully there's some actionable takeaways for you. And I think, Adam, now we're going to dive into potentially some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you. Thanks, Scott. That was incredibly, it was really insightful and really thorough. So I so appreciate that. Actually, one thing you might want to do is let people know how they can get hold of you. Like, for example, put your contact info in the chat. And whilst he's doing that, I've got a couple of questions actually, but if anybody else has got questions, put them in the chat now, or if you want to unmute yourself. In fact, what I'll do is I will let everybody unmute yourself, so that if you want to chat, if you want to ask the question, you can ask Scott directly.
Scott, when we talk about intent, specifically in the clinical trial space, there's so many different therapeutic areas that different sponsors can be looking to promote or produce treatments for. So when we talk about paid media and targeting these therapeutic areas, it seems, in my experience with my company, that the results are the targeting, if you will, is very narrow. We might be getting clicks, but we're getting more clicks from generic terms like clinical trials, virtual clinical trials, as opposed to certain therapeutic areas, although the therapeutic areas are probably where we're going to drive the most business. So that's a bit of a wrestling match that we've had. And so I'm just interested in your thoughts on efficiently targeting these therapeutic areas with intent.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. No, I think it's a really good point. It's one of the areas that's where we start to wave the content marketing flag. And sometimes what we call those, the public service announcement sites. So can you, and again, understanding that there's significant limitations on what you can and can't say, but can you create web assets where you may be able to share information that helps that person to give you more information? So create it into more of a a two-way relationship, rather than getting straight to that kind of the what I'll call the transactional component. Because again, we see it a lot in the space, Tyler, where you end up having to run these incredibly broad and potentially expensive campaigns, and the quality of those can be very limiting. So really looking at how does your content marketing support that? And then with the data that you have, again, there is some profiling and geographic data that can sometimes be helpful for that kind of thing. But the content marketing approach is one that we recommend there. And then trying to create it, like I said, more of a transaction, or not, sorry, more of a relationship than an immediate transaction, understanding again that you've got sort of HIPAA challenges within that. But again, I'm happy to take that one offline, if you want to sort of extend that discussion, I'm happy to get into sort of a few more of those details if that would be useful.
Great, thanks for that question, Tyler. So I actually have a question for you, Scott, and that's, you covered an awful lot of ground, but if there's sort of one or two sort of simple, practical things that anybody could go do sort of directly after this meeting, can you got any suggestions like, do the following?
Yeah, one of the things that we sort of talk about internally a lot, Adam, is the words that you think that your organization or the words that you care about most. Clear your browser, Control-Shift-N if you're in Chrome, get rid of your cookies, put those terms into Google. Because ultimately, we as individuals and working within organizations, we assume that we own those terms. The reality of today is that the authority on who owns what, it's Google or it's one of the other search engines. And then look at the results. Look at who's advertising, look at the content, the organic results beneath that, because that's going to give you the context as to who Google says is the authority. So terms that you may think you own. And again, a lot of people, if we start talking about sort of the class reports, for example, Adam, a lot of people go after those class categories and they start to look to search on those class categories. They're often great from an awareness standpoint, but those categories can be very, very broad. And especially in that sort of evolving healthcare space, you may only offer a subset of that category. So literally type those words in, see what Google gives you back, see who's paying to be there, and then see who the intrinsically relevant results are that Google says is the authority in the space. Because that may help you to refine some of the words. As you refine the terms that you plug into the search engine, that may actually then help you to determine that, we need to talk about it this way from a marketing standpoint, or this is what people need to search for in order to come across us. And that's something that we always, it's a really simple piece of advice, but we often forget that just that search results page is a wealth of information as to your competitors, the competitive landscape, and competitors who you may not treat as business competitors. They may not technically be competing with you on a feature set basis, but they may be competing with you for eyeballs.
Great. I think that's a great answer. One last question here from Briar Hill. And the question is, regarding R&D, have you seen customer journey maps already developed for the 45 to 65-year-old females looking for senior living or post-acute care for their loved ones?
Right, thanks. How long have we got? This is a great question. Specifically, no, but it ties very much back to, no specific to senior living or post-acute care. Yes, to understanding the role of the caregiver in the decision-making process. So this is something very much that personas becomes really, really important. If this is around acute care, who is the person that is actually doing the searching? Who's the person that you're reaching? Because in this case, it may not be the person that needs the care. It may be a loved one, a caregiver who is doing that. And some of the problems that you're looking to solve, maybe they're emotional problems. It could be that you're looking to put a loved one into an acute care facility, whatever that may look like using the right terms. Some of that is about you. It's about guilt. It's about, hold on, I feel bad doing this, but I may have my family to look after. There's a whole sort of social emotional quotient that comes into that discussion and the content that you want in order to reach those audiences. So all I would say as part of that, Briar, is being aware as to who the decision maker is versus whom the patient is a key part of the content marketing and the targeting to look at that.
Okay. Got a question here from Lana Thompson. Our org recently kicked off a 30-day campaign. We receive a weekly impression and CTR report, click-through report, and we also have Google Analytics. In terms of measurement of the tools you mentioned, which would you recommend that we leverage quickly to understand the customer journey for this campaign?
Cool. So Lana, a couple of things here. One is absolutely look at your landing page data by campaign. So in Google Analytics, and again, feel free to email, we're happy just to give you the information, is you'll be able to isolate specifically the traffic that those campaigns have driven, which landing pages they're using, and then you'll be able to start to see the level of engagement for those campaigns. So they'll tell you how many pages they viewed on average. The other thing is if you don't have it set up, this goes back to setting those goals up. Do you have events set up? And I mean events in the Google Analytics sort of technical terminology. And do you have goals? So if there's an action that you're looking for them to take, impressions is great from an eyeball standpoint. CTR kind of gives you a sense of relevance. So how well are we targeting that audience? Are we doing a good job of reaching a relevant audience? But when they land on the site, are they taking the action that you expect them to? So things like when you break it down, isolate the traffic in Google Analytics, look at how long they're on the site and what they're engaging with. And if possible, identify goals or at least actions. So like I mentioned earlier, maybe watching a video, identify those and then have those that included in the reporting. And that'll start to give you a far better context of what's the quality like and is this getting us closer to our targeted outcomes?
Scott, thank you so much. So I want to say thank you and appreciate all of the thought that went into this presentation. There's so much insight. I mean, I'm really looking forward to sharing the recording with everybody. I mean, I think this is something which you can rewatch a few times and get all kinds of different insights out of. So again, thank you so much for doing this today. And thank you everybody for taking the time to attend. Watch your email box, your inboxes over the next couple of days. I'll send out a link to the recording by the end of the week. Bye, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day.